You're listening to the Nansanity Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Andrade, aka Nansanity. I'm an online health, wellness, and business coach, social media strategist, group fitness instructor, and Beachbody Live master trainer. I created this podcast to help entrepreneurs like yourself learn the do's and don'ts of building a business online. Today's episode is the second in my three-part series all about storytelling. So get ready to take some notes and let's get started. Before we dive deep into this episode, I'd like you to go back and listen to episode 12 if you haven't already. There's a lot of content in that episode that I'm going to reference in today's episode, and it's going to make more sense if you listen to these in order. Now let's talk about how to become a better storyteller. I'm going to give you 5 tips that are going to help you get better at storytelling. And you're going to put these together with the previous episode, the 4 C's of storytelling, and the upcoming episode that will be launched next week. Tip number 1. When you're telling a story, make sure that you have structure. For this particular tip, you can refer to the 4 C's because that's an excellent structure that you can start with. Having a structure when storytelling is really going to ensure that you're not going to ramble and you're going to stay on point. If you're like me, I tend to get long-winded, and a lot of times I can kind of go off into a tangent and totally lose my point. And you don't want to do that because you're going to lose your audience. Structure is especially important if you're going to tell your story in multiple parts. You want to give your audience something to look forward to, and if you have a structure, they will come back to find out the continuation of your story. Tip number 2, be sincere. I've talked previously about telling stories that had a lesson that you learned from them. So it's important that you tell authentic stories that you yourself learned from versus someone else's story or something that you didn't learn from at all. That's why you want to be intentional with the stories that you're telling. If you're just telling a story for the sake of having some kind of content to put out there, the sincerity is going to be lacking, it's going to fall flat, and your audience will notice it. Tip number 3, speak to your BFF. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times, especially when you're first starting out, you might not be entirely comfortable in front of the camera telling a story. All that structure and systems that we talked about won't help you if you're uncomfortable speaking. So the idea is to think of someone that you're most comfortable talking to. It can be your best friend, it could be a relative, your spouse, anyone that really makes you feel at home when you're in conversation with them. And when you're telling a story, whether you're recording it or going live, you want to imagine that the person you're talking to is that one person who makes you feel most comfortable. Tip number 4, connect with your audience. The previous step is going to help you connect, but the connection doesn't start when you begin your story. It should be ongoing, and that's why you have to be consistent with posting video and going live. Watching your videos, listening to your stories, that's an investment of time that you're asking from your audience. So they're going to listen more intently and care more about what you have to say, and of course, invest that time if you have a connection with them. Tip number 5. Practice. You have to practice. That's the only way you're going to get better. You can't expect to do 1 or 2 videos and suddenly you're this master storyteller. There's different ways that you can practice. Of course, my favorite, Snapchat, and then there's also Instagram stories and Facebook Live. You can also go live on YouTube as well. Another way to practice is one that I don't think a lot of people think about, FaceTime. You're having conversations with your best friend or your spouse, right? That's the person you're thinking about when you're telling your story. So why not actually practice on them? You can also practice by doing video conference calls and even practicing in the mirror and shooting video of yourself just to kind of play it back and see what areas you need to work on. Here's something I want you to remember. Don't wait until you've got the art of storytelling down to a science. It's never going to be perfect. Like Chalene Johnson says, make it messy. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. It doesn't matter if it's a fumbling mess. Just do it, and I promise you're going to get better every time you do. I hope you found this episode helpful, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. Feel free to leave me a comment below and tell me what you thought, or you can let me know what kind of topics you'd like to hear on a future episode of the Nansanity Chronicles. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you're looking for more valuable info, visit my website, nansanity.com, and go behind the scenes with me every single day on Snapchat at NansanityFit. Thanks so much for listening. Now go out there and be awesome.